Thank you.
All I do, my
Hey, yeah. Nice, no? Wow, it was amazing. What the kids of the
Okay, so we're finishing off page 21 of the booklet, which is where we're talking about the Untitled Pesach, why it's called Pesach. You need a booklet?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah. So what we explained yesterday was that Pesach means to jump, and spiritually speaking, it means that Hashem jumped the order of Ishtalshlus, the normal order of things, of how Hashem's light and Hashem's shines into this world. Normally it depends on the keli, how much you're able to receive. But on Pesach, we saw the Yidden were in the 50th gate, 49th gate of Tumah, and Hashem revealed himself to them in the highest level, which means he jumped over all of those levels in the middle. So it connects us to another thing, and that is, if you look at number 7, it says, on page 21, it says the word Zerizus. Zerizus is one of the character traits which we actually learned about in Parshas Tzav, but it's found in Pirkei Avos and other places, and that is when a person has to do something, a mitzvah, anything positive, not to delay it, and to do it at the first opportunity possible, do it quickly. By the way, when we say quickly, it doesn't mean that you're not doing it in the way that you're concentrating, but it means you're sort of running to do the mitzvah. One of the sources for this character trait actually comes from Pesach. And let me show you where. So look in this booklet a little bit further on page 'I didn't put it in. Okay. So then you'll have to look on this page itself, page 21. It says, there's a pasuk, it says, Shmartem es mitzvahs, es hamatzos. You should watch the matzahs. What does it mean, watch them? Watch them, they don't become chametz. So we know that the way you make matzah is you take water and you mix it with flour, and then it becomes dough, and then you make it into a matzah, you bake it. But once the water touches the flour, you're not allowed to, it can't have more than 18 minutes until it's completed, finished baking. So you have to watch it that it doesn't become chametz. You have to be very careful. So the Gemara says, Rashi also brings that in this in Chumash, that the word matzah is spelled exactly the same as if the word were mitzvahs. Ushmartem is a mitzvahs. What does that mean? So look at number 9, mitzvah haba liyotcha al tachmitzenu. Just like with a matzah, we say make sure it doesn't become sour. A mitzvah that comes by you, in other words, you have an opportunity to do a mitzvah, don't let the mitzvah become sour. What it means is that if you let it stay too long, it'll get sour, get ruined. Same with a mitzvah. If you have a mitzvah and you don't do it right away, you might not have the opportunity to do the mitzvah anymore. So therefore, to be quick about doing the mitzvah. But then there's more to it because it says that, where did I put it? I must have put it somewhere. Oh, here it is on page 28. Look at page 28. We know that one of the things about matzah is that the reason why we eat matzah because they were rushed out of Mitzrayim. They went out of Mitzrayim fast. And this is the way they were told to eat their matzah. Look at page 28. Look at the pasuk. Masnechem chagurim, your belt should be on your waist. Na'alechem b'raglechem, your shoes should be on your feet. Makelchem b'yetchem, your walking stick should already be in your hand. V'achalta oisa b'chipozan, and eat it fast, because they have to go fast out of Mitzrayim. So we see that there's something about Pesach that's related to the union of chipozan, of doing things quickly and fast, and that's why we learn from this. And that's why it is when you bake matzahs, you're rushing to make sure that there's no 18 minutes, that it doesn't become sour. But the deeper spiritual reason behind it is because the whole union of Pesach was Hashem jumping over all the levels in the middle, and basically what happens when you jump? You get to the place, your destination, much faster than you would get with the normal route. The normal route is step by step, and that takes a lot of time. When you jump, in one moment, you're there. So what happened by Hashem was he jumped over all the levels in the middle. And the Gashmis, how does that express itself? By our doing mitzvahs in a way which is fast. Okay, we're going to go to the next thing, and that is the mitzvah of matzah, page 31. We know that the main mitzvah, every yontif has a mitzvah which is the main mitzvah, the mitzvah of the day. It's shofar, Rosh Hashanah, it's blowing shofar, and sukkahs, it's eating in a sukkah or the lulav. When it comes to Pesach, the mitzvah of the day is mainly the mitzvah of eating matzah. In the times of the Beis Hamikdash, it was also bringing the korban Pesach. So we'll go a little bit into what is the union of eating matzah up Chassidus. If we're going to have extra time and we finish this early enough, we'll probably learn a mimer from the Tzemach Tzedek that explains what I'm going to tell you now briefly, but here we'll have it in a general way. So in the Zohar, it says that matzah has two names. And these are the two things on the list on page 31. Number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is Michal de Behimnusa, which means bread of faith. And number 2 is Michal Dasfasa, bread of healing. That means that matzah does two things. One thing is matzah brings faith, and the other thing is matzah brings healing.
What is the first? Bread of faith?
Mehemnusa is the Aramaic word for Amunah, bread of faith, of Amunah. And the other one is Machodes Michel, bread that brings refuah. What's the connection to bread that brings refuah? So the Zohar gives a mashal of a king that had a son, prince who was very sick. And then the doctors healed him. And the doctor said, in order for you to be healed, you have to be very careful with what you eat. And for a short while, you're not allowed to eat any of these foods that they told him which of the foods he's not allowed to eat. And after you don't eat those foods for a period of time, then you're going to become healthy again. Once you're healthy, you can go back and eat regular food. That's the mashal. What's the nimshal? We were in Mitzrayim, and as a result of being in Mitzrayim, we became sick meaning in a spiritual sense. And the Eibusha said, I'm going to heal you, but the way you need to be healed is for 7 days, don't eat any chametz. And then after that, you can go out and you'll be able to be healthy and eat regular food. Why? Why we should be healthy?
No. Why stop eating?
So we're going to explain. Obviously, begashmius, when a doctor gives a person a certain diet, it means these foods are not good for your health. This person can eat salt. That's not good for this part. A certain person can eat other foods. It's not good for something else in the body. Foods have an effect on the body, right? So therefore, there's certain foods that are healthy and certain foods that are not healthy. And there's certain foods that for one person, it's actually a good thing. They need more salt in the body. And another person, the doctor says, be careful. It's not good for your blood pressure. Too much salt. It's going to harm you. So basically, chametz is the food that harms us spiritually. So the Eibusha said for 7 days, forget it. You can't have any of it. But after that, you'll be healed and you could. So what is healing us? The food that is healing us is matzah, which means look at matzah like a big pill. You know, you take pills. Matzah is a big round pill. You take it for 7 days, and that's the prescription they gave us, become healed. So we need to explain the two inyanim, milchad hemnusa, milchad asvasa. So first I want to explain milchad hemnusa. Where's the source? Where is there any source that Yetzias Mitzrayim is connected to Amunah? Where do we see such a thing? So let's go to the source. Turn the page 33. So here is a nevuah. It talks about Yetzias Mitzrayim and Matan Torah, and this is what it says. You see where it's underlined. Ve'erastich li la'olam. Erastich, erusin is from the word of marriage. Ve'erastich li la'olam. Hashem says to the Jewish people that they're married forever. Ve'erastich li b'tzedek or b'mishpat. The marriage is with tzedek, with righteousness. The mishpat with justice, chesed with kindness, rachamim, compassion. The rastachli be'amuna, the marriage is with amuna, v'yedatet Hashem, and you know Hashem. So the Gemara says, it says marriage, but it also says different terms. It says justice, and it says with tzedakah, and chesed, and rachamim, and amuna. So this is what the Gemara says. That when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, that was the beginning of our marriage with the Eibishter, and that beginning of the marriage was with Amunah. We didn't have the Torah yet. We didn't have the Mishpat. Torah is Mishpat, because Torah is all about judgment, judging how much you have to pay for this, and what you have to pay when there's damage, judgment on what's kosher and what's not kosher, judgment on what's pure and what's impure. All the judgments are found in Torah. So the Torah is called Mishpat, Eila Mishpatim. These are the judgments. But before we received the Torah, when out of Mitzrayim, everything was with Amunah, with faith. And therefore, we see that the Mitzrayim, going out of Mitzrayim, is identified as faith, Amunah. And when we receive the Torah, that's when we yodatet Hashem. You should know Hashem. That's when we have the union of knowledge. Another example of this is if you look on page 34. It's also a nevuah, but I made a copy because we have it in the davening of Rosh Hashanah. There's one part where we say a lot of psukim that have to do with remembrance. So we quote this pasuk, Koi Omer Hashem. This is what Hashem said, Zacharti lo chesed nurayich. I remembered the kindness of your youth, of Abbas Klul Asayich, the love of the time when you were a kala, when you were engaged. And what was it? Lechtech achrei bamidbar be'eretz lo yizarua. You followed me into the desert in a land that was not cultivated. In other words, this was pure Amunah. Moshe Rabbeinu told the Yidden, let's go to the desert. There were a few million people there. We know there was 600,000, but that's the men and only a certain age, between 20 and 60. But altogether, men, women, and children, there should have been about 3 million people. That's the way it's calculated. And where are we going? Into the desert. What's a desert? A place where there's no food. And it means within a few days, there'll be no food and there's no place to get food. How are we going to survive? They didn't know in advance there's going to be a miracle that a food will fall down from Shemayim. So the answer is that they trusted, Emunah, they had faith. They didn't understand, they couldn't explain it, but they just had faith that Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them, Hashem said to go, they're trusting. So it means when they went out of Mitzrayim, it was a matter of trust, of Emunah. So therefore, in Chassidus and in the Zohar, it says that matzah is Emunah. In other words, just like the first time, what the Yidden demonstrated was Emunah, this is really what's happening spiritually. And when it comes to Shavuos, Hashem gives us the ability to understand. He gave us the Torah, which is wisdom, intellect, that we should understand intellectually Hashem and all the commandments of the Torah. But on Pesach, that's when Hashem gives us the power to have emunah, to have faith. And how do we have this faith? It's from eating the matzah. So in other words, this means that just like begashmias, when you talk about different foods, that you eat a certain food and it gives you strength. Here's a person who's weak and he hasn't eaten for maybe a day or two, so he's weak, he can hardly walk, he can hardly talk. And then he eats food and all of a sudden he's all full of energy. He can go ahead and do all the things he always did, which means the food gives the person physical energy. So too, this food gives the person spiritual energy. And what is that energy? That he has emunah. How is it that food gives emunah? What is the emunah coming from? So this is something which we did have earlier in a different class, but being that this is Pesach and that's what matzah is all about, so we have to explain it. So the explanation is like this, that in essence, every Yid has emunah. No one has to give it to us. We're born with emunah. You have a neshama, and the neshama naturally has emunah in Hashem. It's just part of the gene of the neshama, that it believes in Hashem. So what we really need is not to be given something, but to develop and cultivate something which is already there. So where is it and how is it that a person could have emunah, and especially emunah pshuta? We know there's a term called emunah pshuta, which means simple faith. And simple faith, how is it so simple to have simple faith? If you're a child and there is no intelligence, it makes sense that your parents tell you something and you just accept it because you're so simple. So you don't ask any questions, you don't need any proof, you don't need evidence, it's just simple. But if you're an intelligent and you're an adult and everything else in life, you ask questions, simple thing like buying something, selling something, you question, when should I buy? When should I sell? Is it worth it? Is it not worth it? This house, is it a good house to live in? Not a good house to live in. This job, is it a good job to do? Everything I approach with logic. So therefore, how is it possible that a person should have natural, simple faith in Hashem? So the answer Chassidus gives is that there are two parts to the neshama, right? There's the part of the neshama that's down here, and there's the part of the neshama that never came down and remains up there. When we say the part of the neshama that never came down, it doesn't mean physically, geographically speaking, that there's a neshama that's somewhere over there near Jupiter and Mars, and there's a neshama that comes down on planet Earth and goes into the body. Up there is not a physical space. So what is up there? Where is up there? Where's Atzilus, Bria, Yitzira, Asiya? What? Right, up there is not in space. Up there means, just like when you say the price went up, nothing moved in space. It doesn't mean that there's $1 inside this coat, and now the dollar went from here to there. It went up, the price went up. It's a way of speaking, but it doesn't mean that physically something moved in physical space. If a person went up in level, let's say first they were a worker in a company, and now they became the manager of the company, they had a promotion, they went up. That means that they went up in level, but it's not in space. If a person was a Beinani and he became a tzaddik, Sheina Gomer, then he went up. So when we say that there's up, the neshama is up there, it doesn't mean up in a physical geographic location. It's very hard because we're so gashmias that everything we think of is always in physical gashmias terms. Up is up there and down is down there, but really up and down is in terms of godliness, revealed or hidden. So before the neshama comes to this world, the neshama is in a spiritual place, and the neshama sees and hears and experiences godliness firsthand. And for the neshama, it doesn't need emunah to believe in Hashem before the neshama comes down, because the neshama sees Hashem. Just like we don't need emunah to know that there's a table here and there's walls here and there's a ceiling. We see it. That's how the neshama does not need emunah for Hashem, because the neshama sees Hashem. There's a part of the neshama, when the neshama comes down, all that changes. The neshama forgets what it saw. It no longer remembers what it saw. It becomes totally concealed and hidden. And down here, you don't see anything. So you need emunah. But the neshama up there saw Hashem. And not only that, the neshama up there still continues to see Hashem. That is a part of the neshama that never changes. So even now, while our neshama is down here in the physical body, and it's in a place where everything is hidden and concealed, there's a part of me that's still in a place where it sees and hears and experiences godliness firsthand. And therefore, that part of the neshama has emunah with absolute certainty. And that emunah is transmitted to the part of the neshama that's in me. So the fact that I feel certain about Hashem, that comes from the part of my neshama that sees Hashem. And being that the neshama sees Hashem and is certain, that certainty is projected into the conscious me. So then how come every yid should have emunah? Every yid has a neshama. Every yid's neshama is up there. So why don't we have it? How come every yid doesn't have natural emunah? Shouldn't be one Jew in the world that has issues with emunah. What's the answer?
Esther.
What?
Esther.
Esther who?
No,
Esther. It's hidden.
It's hidden.
Why?
But they're not the phone.
Right, then how come by other people it's open? They have emunah. And you say, where do they get emunah from? Because in Shalom the Maila has emunah. So if it's that way for one person, why shouldn't it be that way for everybody?
You have to take off layers.
Right, okay, so let me explain when you're saying Hester, you have to take off layers. When we're saying that what the neshama l'mayla experiences flows to the neshama down here, it can only flow if there's nothing blocking. But if there's something blocking, it won't reach me. So this is like you have a reservoir of water that has hundreds of thousands of millions of gallons of water. There's a pipe that goes from the reservoir to my house, so I have all the water that I need. But what if something happens and there's something blocking that pipe? There's something in the pipe that's clogging it up and it doesn't go through. So when that happens, I can't get any water. The reservoir is there, I am here, but the flow stops. There's something blocking. So there are things that could be blocking that I don't feel what my neshama l'mayla sees. I don't feel that certainty. So the truth is I still don't have to create something new. I have to just remove the blockage. I have to take away that which is blocking. So the Torah tells us this is the prescription. On the day of Pesach, you eat matzah, which is something that's being baked exactly where the Eibishter said, special instructions, and you eat this matzah, that matzah will allow that the emunah that's up there should flow more freely into me down here. And therefore, from eating matzah, a person will have emunah in Hashem.
Only Matashmura.
No. I mean, Matashmura is what we call, it depends what shmura means. When we use the term Matashmura, we mean an extra hidur with matzah. The basic halacha is that you have to make sure that once the water and the flour touch, from that point on, it shouldn't be more than 80 minutes until it's baked. Okay, what's matzah shmura? It's a good question. Anyone know what is the difference between that and matzah shmura?
It's done within like 5 minutes.
No?
They watch the grain from when it's harvested or when it's grown.
When it's growing, everything
Oh, when
is
it's
wet.
harvested.
Right.
When it's
That even
harvested.
before it becomes flour, before you mix it with water, when you cut the wheat off the ground and you have bundles of wheat, it shouldn't get wet. In other words, they will not go out to the field to cut the wheat unless it's a sunny day and you're sure it's not going to rain. I mean, years ago, it was much harder because they didn't know. Today, Baruch Hashem, we know ahead of time if it's going to be raining or not. But they had to look for a day that looked like, and then run out to the field and do the job. So that's Matashmura, and that's an extra stringency. So generally speaking, any matzah will do it. Naturally, the more muhuda the matzah is, the more the matzah is sort of, the mitzvah is done in a more stringent way, then the power of matzah will also be in a more revealed way. And there are 3 things that we focus on. I wrote it down on the bottom of the page. One of it, that it should be shmura matzah, which means the matzah should be protected from water, even when it's still cut off from the field. The second thing, it should be hand matzah. And the third thing, it should be round matzah. And that's one of the, I think this is one of the first miftzayim of the Rebbe, was to give out matzahs to Yidden. Even Yidden who have matzah, but they have machine matzah, they have square matzahs, that at least for the Seder, they should eat a matzah which is round, and the matzah which is shmura, and the matzah which is made by hand.
So this Friday, if someone is going to the Pesach, he needs to bring matzah to people.
Can't say he needs to, but that's now, being that we're approaching Pesach, is the time to bring matzah, yeah.
A question, what is the source that our neshama hears and experience the Shem even know?
Where's the source?
Yeah, when we can read it.
That what?
That our neshama right now is hearing Hashem, loving to Hashem, and all something. You said that the neshama is even now.
Oh, sees what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, the source, this is the way the Baal Shem Tov explains, one of the sources is, let's turn to page 35. It's Pirkei Avos. You have it? 35. Amar Rabbi Shua ben Levi. B'chol yoyim v'yoyim, every day, Basko Yetziz Mahar Chayrev, there's a heavenly voice that comes out of Har Chayrev, which is Har Sinai, and the voice says, Oilem labrias melbeina shel Torah. Woe to those people that embarrass the Torah, and they don't take advantage of learning Torah. And the Baal Shem Tov asked, what's the purpose of this voice? Who hears it? If it's for tzaddikim who hear heavenly voices, they don't need it. They're not embarrassing the Torah. They're tzaddikim. If it's for those people who are not tzaddikim and they need it, but they don't hear it. So his answer is what we just said. Every Jew, even if he's not a tzaddik, but his neshama hears it. And when the neshama hears it, the neshama gets excited, the neshama gets inspired. And that inspiration flows to the conscious neshama. And the Baal Shem Tov says, this explains why sometimes people, in the middle of nothing, no special reason why, they feel a certain excitement, a certain inspiration about davening, about learning, about doing a mitzvah, and they can't explain why it happened to me today. But the real reason is because the neshama, the Maila, hears these announcements. So you might ask the same question. So then every day I should be inspired because every day there are announcements. It says b'chol yom v'yom. So the answer is some days the pipes are clogged. And the pipes, hatzinorot, are clogged. And some days they're not clogged. So the main thing is that the pipe should be clear. What it clogs it, it's like in the human body, you have veins and the blood flows from the heart. So one of the most important things is that it should be clear. It shouldn't be clogged. There are things that it clogs the veins and then the blood flow is not the way it should be. So what clogs it? Basically doing things, saying things, and thinking things that are not according to Torah affects the process that it gets clogged and it doesn't flow so easily from the neshama l'mayla to the neshama l'mata. So that's what it means that matzah gives us amunah. Again, we have the amunah already, but matzah allows, and matzah is instrumental that the amunah which my neshama has should flow into my body. And I should have. So even a person who, let's say, made a change in their life, they got to amunah through learning and questions. Somebody who grew up without Yiddishkeit, and they went and they did research, and they did all sorts of with Shabbatonim, and they argued with the rabbi, they argued with the Rebbitzin, they had questions, and they got answers, and eventually they decided, okay, this is emes, I'm going to make changes in my life. So even though they came to it and they arrived to it through seichel and thinking and questions and answers, ultimately the amunah that they're going to have will be much stronger than what the seichel sort of demands, because what the seichel did, it removed the blockage. And once the blockage removes, something much stronger comes out, which is the natural amunah, which we all have. So on the list, the things that I'm referring to is number 11, Yisrael, Maminim B'nei Maminim. This is in Gemara. The Yidden are children, believers, children of believers. That's one of the sources that show that Yidden naturally have amunah in Hashem. And number 12 and number 13, that brings out the point that we see from the Pasuk that going out of Mitzrayim is part of the marriage. And when we receive the Torah as part of the marriage, and we're going to talk more about it in a later discussion, but there are two stages in a marriage. I'm sure you heard this before from me. We'll say it again. There are two stages in a marriage. One is called Erisin, and one is called Nisuin, number 12 and number 13. Erisin has two names. Sometimes it's called Erisin, sometimes it's called Kedushin. Number 13 is the second stage. It's Nisuin, the chuppah and the yichud. Which means when you go to a wedding today and you're observing a chuppah, you're really observing two things that are happening at the same time, but it's really two separate things. So in the times of Gemara, for example, what you see today at a chuppah in the times of Gemara happened a year apart from each other. So when the chassan gave the kala the ring, and he said that they're marrying to each other, that was called kedushin and erisin. And they were considered husband and wife, but they still weren't allowed to live together as husband and wife. And they would take a break for a year. During this year, they would both prepare for the marriage. And the actual marriage was a year later. What was the actual marriage? They would stand under the chuppah, the sheva brachas, and the yichud. And that would finalize the marriage. Then the marriage was complete. So it says in the Medrash that just like a marriage has two stages, so too our marriage with the Eibishter also has two stages. The first stage is when we went out of Mitzrayim. That's the Kedushin. That's the Erisin. And the second stage is when we received the Torah at Har Sinai. And what are the two stages? The first stage is when we connected to Hashem with Amunah. We didn't have the Torah yet. We didn't have the knowledge, the intellectual part, so it was just Amunah. And the second stage is the union of marriage, and that the final part of the marriage, that's when we stood by Har Sinai. And by the way, this also explains an interesting custom about matzah. Every time you sit down to eat, every Friday night, every Shabbos day, every Yontif, and you make a bracha on Hamaitzi, and the same is during the week. If you wash on bread during the week, you're supposed to dip the bread into salt. And of course, the reason for this is because in the Beis Hamikdash, every carbon had salt. So you dip the bread into the salt. The only time that you don't dip the bread into salt is on the night of Pesach. You don't dip the matzah into salt. Why? Anybody know the reason?
It's not by itself, it's already a korban.
Okay, close. Keep going another little bit.
No.
So being that the mitzvah here is the matzah, so it says in halacha, in order not to take away from the matzah, we don't have anyone have any other taste. Once you dip it into salt, there's another taste. And that takes away a little bit from tasting the matzah. So because we want to have the pure taste of the matzah, we don't dip it in salt. That's the reason according to halacha. The reason according to Chassidus is that because matzah is amuna is something which is higher than logic. How does it express itself? Begashmi is that, in other words, food that has a taste, the difference between logic and not logic, when you understand something logically, it gives us pleasure. I understand, wow, this makes so much sense. It's so beautiful that because of this, we do this and we do that, and accomplishes this and accomplishes that. Emunah means I don't understand what we're accomplishing. I don't know why. I just know Hashem said this, and I'm there. So basically, the salt, which is something that gives a taste, represents seichel and logic. In fact, it's interesting. The Hebrew word, what's the Hebrew word for taste? Tam. What's the Hebrew word for reason? Tam. Tam means a reason. Not like in Russian. Tam means something else. What?
This spells differently or this spells exactly the same?
Exactly the same way. Tes, ayin, mem.
But Siba, no?
You know the story that wants to say there by a certain Rebbe, not one of the Chabad Rebbes, and he started when the four sons, there's Chacham, Russia, Yidei Lishel, and then there's a Tam. They said, Tam Mahu Eimer. And all of a sudden this Rebbe started crying and everybody was crying. But Tam Mahu Eimer, why are they all crying? Because in Russian, Tam means over there. And he was saying over there, meaning when this life ends and you're going to go over there, Mahu Eimer, what are you going to say? They can start asking you questions about your life, what you did do, what you didn't do. But Tam is the way it's spelled is Tes Ayin Mem, which means reason, and it also means taste. And the connection with the two words is very simple, because when you understand something, then it's pleasurable. It tastes good. When you don't understand, you're just doing what the Kabbalah says. Being that the whole point of matzah is emunah, therefore it has no taste. This also explains why the matzah should be round. In Kabbalah, it is a word in Kabbalah that represents the infinite light of Hashem is number 8, Igulim. What?
It's the first time we see it.
Igulim, Baruch Hashem. Could you imagine if you wouldn't learn anything new? Then they learn something new. Igulim means circles, yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm assuming how that is spelled?
Which word? Oh, it's on page, it's right here, number 8. You can see it. Ayin Yud Gimel Vav Lamed Yud Mem.
Well, it's written in the Zohar.
This is in the Zohar. In the Zohar, in the writings of Arizal, is Igulim and Kav. Igul means a circle, Kav means a line. The line represents the finite light, and the circle represents the infinite light. And why does a circle represent the infinite light? Because in a circle, there's no beginning, there's no end, there's no middle, there's no parts. The circle, every part is the same as the other. And in a line, there's a beginning. And every part that's closer to the beginning is closer to the top. And whatever is further from the top. So there are levels. But in a circle, there are no levels. And therefore, a circle represents those things in Torah that there are a lot of things in Torah that are to be done in the way of a circle. Where is it? For example, Simchas Torah. We're supposed to circle with the dancing. Hashyness, you go around the Lulav and Esrog also in a circle. Simchas Torah we do hakafas, 7 circles. At a wedding, there are different customs, how many times, but the general custom is that the kava and the family, they circle the chassan. Again, they're making a circle. Of course, the ring, according to halacha, doesn't have to be a ring. It could be money. The reason why it's a ring is because it's a circle. What is the connection between a circle? Because a circle in general represents believable, infinite. The difference between Amunah and Seichel is Amunah is infinite and Seichel is finite. When you understand something logically, that is something which is limited, and it's limited according to your logic. Your understanding, your commitment, your appreciation is limited according to how much you understand. Amunah is something which is beyond logic, and that's why Amunah is something which is infinite. So I guess when the physical matzah is also physically round, it means it's more of a keli, that the fact that matzah transmits emunah is more revealed and more effective. So therefore, when you do mitzvah, you give somebody matzah that is round, that means, of course, they're observing the mitzvah even if it's not round, and they're observing the mitzvah even if it's not shmura, and observing the mitzvah even if it's not hand matzah. But if the matzah is made with these hidurim, then the spiritual power in the matzah comes out in a much stronger way. There are a lot of Maimarim also that focus on what it says in number 7. That when an infant, at first, the infant only drinks milk, drinks the mother's milk, and then he starts eating something like grain. So the tinuk, when he starts eating grain, that's when he really starts speaking. That's when he starts speaking, and he could say Abba. Not he's not speaking, deep philosophy, but he could say Abba. What it means in the nimshal is that when we start eating matzah, that's when we can say Abba. That's when we have our emunah in the Eibishter. That develops our emunah in the Eibishter. So in a sense, Pesach, going on Mitzrayim, is our infancy. This is where we're starting. And the first thing is emunah. And matzah has the power to empower us with emunah in Hashem. Okay, I think we covered everything on this page. What I didn't go into is that how emunah and what's the connection that emunah comes from the Raya Mehemna, from the Raya Neman, from the shepherd of the generation. The reason is because I think we had a mimer about it. We learned about it in the pages here. I made a few copies of the Rebbe's mimer about the Tzava. So being that that's already done and clear, we don't have to learn it again. And tomorrow we'll go into chametz. Now that we ate matzah, now we'll talk about chametz tomorrow. What's wrong with chametz? Okay.